event worked. Now, the seance I've described was a public demonstration of physical mediumship for which there was a fee. I can't remember how much it was, but maybe it was £45. And when you think you've got to pay for a couple of people to travel from Australia over to Britain, all their hotel costs, traveling within Britain costs, then you know it's good value for money, because it's not profit, is it? It's not complete profit. Most of the work of a physical circle is done in the circle, in the weekly meeting or however regular it is. And that can go on for years. And it takes absolutely years to develop, in most cases, physical mediumship. So you're also contributing towards the development costs of the medium over all those years. And, you know, you're paying for somebody's time. So why not pay for somebody's time? Because that person can never buy back that time. And it's the same when you pay for any kind of service. You're paying for the skill of developing and their actual time on the day, and any tools they may need. One physical medium was filmed, unbeknownst to the medium, in the blacked out seance using an infrared camera. And whilst the people in the room who probably paid money to witness the seance were told that it was spirit people were walking around, much like I've said that spirit people were walking around in the seance that I previously described. You can't know for sure. So you restrain the medium, you do all these checks on the room, and it's on the person, etc., etc. But you can't be 100% sure. Now, often spirit people control the medium, untie them, and walk them around the seance room. That is all well and good in the development stage and in the home circle, where it's the trusted members who are present. So we're not talking about those types of seances. We're talking about public seances where fees are paid. And should you have the medium walking around the room and portray it as something else? Maybe not. And so the union and the centre that that particular event occurred, which was Banyan Retreat over in the southeast of England, they and other interested parties got together and created a protocol. So the Spiritualists National Union and other interested parties protocol says that we don't particularly want a blacked out seance to take place on our premises. We prefer subdued lighting. But if the spirit team demand blackout, then we would like an infrared camera in the room, and also a person not connected with the circle outside the room monitoring what was being seen on the infrared camera. Now, I know that you can see spirit people on infrared cameras, because I saw one of these programs on the TV of the paranormal investigation type. I think it was TAPS, the Atlantic Parapsychology Group. And they were at a plantation in south of North America, and they were filming across the lawns or the openness of the vista at night, totally in the dark. You could see each person in the group. There was two of them, and the camera, shone on both of them at some point. The camera person and the person with him, and also then panned around the open space, which they said was lawns. And walking across that lawn were two humanoid figures caught in the infrared. So I'm sure you could see spirit people on the infrared. Now, spirit circles, physical circles, say that there can't be infrared cameras used in these circles. But that isn't true. The Saturday nightclub circle of Minnie Harrison with Tom Harrison, Tom took lots of infrared photographs in that circle of the spirit people who were full form materializations. And they said they saw those people in the subdued light, or the light that the spirit people brought. There were also infrared photographs taken at Jack Webber seances run by Harry Edwards. And they had, I forget the name of the photographer, but he took a considerable amount of infrared photographs, obviously with the permission of the spirit team. I am told that the infrared used in infrared cameras of the security nature, they actually use much less infrared than coloured light bulbs, which are often used in seances. You put the little red lamp on, there's more infrared coming out of that red bulb. It's only a coating of red. Or the genuine, you can have red glass bulbs as well. There is more infrared coming out of both of those types of bulbs than the infrared security cameras. So what's the problem? If you used infrared photography in a blacked out seance, only applicable according to the union for the fee-paying type, then should the medium be walked around the room under control, everybody would know about it, and you would know the difference, that this isn't a spirit person walking around the room, this is the medium being walked around the room. I think in the instance where the medium was pictured walking around the room on the infrared that he knew nothing about, he did not know that camera was there. He was being passed off as a spirit person. They were touching his body, which had been he'd removed his shirt. So not quite the same thing. What the union are proposing with their protocol is that any blacked out seances that do take place on their premises have this infrared camera control. Now, it's totally understandable why physical mediums take precautions, because their health, indeed their very lives, can be put at risk due to this form of mediumship. And that's the type of mediumship where ectoplasm is exuded from the physical body, which is then used by the spirit people to press into to show materialized form. So ectoplasmic mediumship can be dangerous because it has to return to the body, and only certain gifted people can be physical mediums. Now, an ectoplasmic medium is unique in that only certain people are capable of exuding that substance. Now, the full package of the substance is a combination from the spirit world and this rare individual who can produce the ectoplasm. And the spirit scientists add their own concoction to the mixture. Now, that ectoplasm has to return to the physical body. And when it does so, it can often pick up anything that might be lying around in the seance room. And I think it was Helen Duncan who once found a pin inside her skin after the ectoplasm had returned to her body. And the pin had been picked up off the floor of the seance room. So that's why seance rooms are kept particularly clean and free from detritus like that. I once witnessed Margaret go into a form of shock at my doing when we were sitting next to each other on the settee, and suddenly around the room there was this fluorescent green buzzing thing, and it looked like the razor blades that you have in an electric razor, you know, the rectangular type, not the circular type. And it was fluorescent yellow greenish color, and it was buzzing around the room. And I used my little pinky to touch Margaret's arm on the settee next to me. I didn't realize she was in a deep trance of some kind. And she nearly jumped out of her skin with the shock of just being slightly touched. Now, Alec Harris had a seance interrupted by journalists in South Africa who swapped tickets with the spiritualist, who spiritualists had been invited to the seance, and they swapped places. And one of the journalists tried to grab one of the full form materializations. At the same time, a curtain was flung back on a window, allowing other people from the newspaper to use flashlights to take photographs into the room. The spirit people stopped any photograph being developed. They just blanked them. So the newspaper was supposedly going to have this great scoop of denouncing Alec Harris's mediumship, and they didn't have a picture to show for it. But here's a quote from the book by Louis Harris on her husband's mediumship after describing the exposure attempt, as Louis called it. I noticed a great change in Alec after the exposure attempt. His health was not as robust as before, and at the time he must have been 72 years of age. Something seemed to have gone out of him. He had slowed down considerably. Alec had always been such an energetic person, constantly looking for things to do about the home. Now, everything seemed to be an effort for him. And very, very sadly, he only lived another 2 years after that point. So the world was denied such wonderful mediumship because of the crass actions of a pair of journalists and their team. And even worse, Helen Duncan, one of her seances was interrupted in, I think it was 1951. Not for the first time. There'd been interruptions to Helen Duncan seances. And you remember that Helen Duncan was the physical medium who was put away in prison during the Second World War due to the fear of revealing state secrets. And it was in the build-up to D-Day. So the British government were quite paranoid about somebody revealing evidence of sinking ships, for example, prior to the Ministry of Defence announcing said ship had gone down. So that was ostensibly the reason why they needed to treat Helen Duncan the way they did. But in 1951, way after the war, police interrupted one of her seances, went in, blaring whistles, lights, ectoplasm returned to the body so quickly it damaged the poor lady, middle-aged woman. And within about 6 weeks, I think it was, very, very sadly, from the internal injuries, Helen Duncan died. An otherwise robust woman, although in mid-age. So ectoplasm, a form of mediumship, can be dangerous to the medium. So every care is taken, and you have to accept whatever the medium is prepared to have by way of protocol. So if they decide, no, that protocol is not for me, they have every right to. It is, after all, their health, their life that is at stake. So Warren Kaler, he did 2 seances next door. And at the start of both of them, he erected his own very heavy, large wooden cabinet, needed screws to hold it together. And he did that in the afternoon, did the seance in the early evening, invited guests sitting around the emptied room, otherwise emptied room, cabinet now in place. Bulbs taken out of the ceiling. I don't blame him for doing that. Probably checking the sitters going in for metal devices. Again, that is said to be extremely bad for physical mediums. And even in the seances I attended, no metal was allowed in. So you can understand the precautions. But what Warren Kaler said, if anybody grabbed a spirit form in the way that they grabbed Alec Harris's spirit forms, the ectoplasm would return to the cabinet. He would jump in alarm, and the cabinet may very well be thrown into the room. Well, it was a very small room, and 18 people in there, other than the medium, sitting around the edges. Somebody could very well be on the receiving end of that heavy wooden cabinet. So nobody was tempted to touch anything. But I was sitting a row in front of everybody else, and there was a touch on my leg, which I've got to be honest, I would have said was a ranging touch to find out where I was in the blacked out room. So with the Alec Harris seances, you saw the spirit people walking around the room. In the Warren Kaler seance and in the David Thompson seance I've attended, no lights were able to cast onto the spirit form, and they didn't bring their own light. But if you look at the painting by James Tissot, where he witnessed his late wife's manifestation as a full form materialized spirit, along with the medium's guide, both those spirits brought their own lights with them to illuminate themselves in an otherwise blacked out seance. So with the Warren Kaler seance, there was to my right, in the row of chairs against that wall, and my back, there was a row behind me with a door behind that row, and that door was locked. The young lady to my right was the smallest person in the room, and she was sitting on a plastic patio chair, common to all gardens around the world. And when the lights were put on, there must have been a torch or a light that Warren's team brought with him. When the room was lit, even if it was only marginally lit, after the seance had ended, the young lady was sitting right opposite me to our both surprise, because we didn't hear a thing. That wasn't exceptional, because there was very loud music being played by Warren's team in the room. And the young lady said she didn't feel herself being moved. I definitely didn't hear any chair landing in front of me. And she also added, though, that she smelt a strong smell of BO. Make whatever you like of that commentary. Myself and my co-organizer was Neil, my friend. We tried to pick up the chair. No, we couldn't have tried to pick it up unless we weighted it, because nobody was as small as that girl. I don't know. I don't think we tried to pick it up, but we definitely tried to slide it on the wooden floor. And it was a wooden floor, very much like this one, which you might have seen from the camera work there, that the floor is panelled. It's a board's about 4 or 5 feet long, 8 inches wide, and they fit into each other, slot into each other. And that was the same in the other room. And when we tried to slide that patio chair, there's no way it would slide, because the plastic legs were catching on the joins between the planks, and to look at, it looks perfectly smooth. But I can assure you, trying to move a plastic chair on this floor did not glide gracefully. It caught on the joins everywhere. So that chair wasn't slid. Warren is a fairly tall guy, but he won't mind me saying he looked quite overweight. Whether he had muscles developed for lifting a person in a chair and moving it, I don't know. Maybe he was strong enough to do that. I can only report what happened. I haven't written up my observations of the Warren Kaler seance. I will say this about Warren Kaler. He was the inspiration for Christinucci to pursue her very long interest in physical mediumship. And she said that in her first seance of physical mediumship, it was a Warren Kaler seance, and it was a lighted room, and it was in a council sort of hall, or a church hall, or that kind of hall. And there were grey shadow spirit people walking around that you could see with the naked eye. So Christinucci, from that moment onwards, was convinced of the efficacy of physical mediumship and did her best to develop future physical mediums. And that story can be found in Christinucci's book, Spirits in a Teacup. But that was my report on a David Thompson seance. And it's not the only report that sounds quite similar. Sue Farrow, when she was editor of Psychic News, she also did a report, and it sounds as if she went to the same venue as I did. The photographs that were included on the Psychic News report are of the same place. You can see the beams and the overall layout of the room. And it's a shame that such a seance is blacked out. So that was 2013. That was maybe 3 years before what happened in a blacked out seance with Gary Mannion as the physical medium over in Banyan Retreat. And that event has been filmed, and the film has been widely put out on YouTube, etc. And it basically shows the medium, Gary Mannion, coming out of the cabinet, taking his shirt off, waving it around in the air as if to make spirit breezes, walking around the room and doing other things. And basically, he is saying that the spirit entranced him and had him doing that. I don't know if that would be true. I've seen countless times the medium being removed from the restraints and walked around a pitch black room. When I say I've seen it, seen the effects of it. And when the red light is put on and the medium is sitting next to you, you know she has been moved around the room. When that occurs, the spirit people make it clear that it is them who have moved the medium around in the entranced condition. They don't often tell you beforehand, in my experience, but they could do so. And it is a leveler being in the black. The spirit people can't be seen by us, and we can't see each other. And I don't know whether spirit people can see us, they possibly can. But it's an equalizer. And, you know, everybody is on the same basis. So what happened after Gary Mannion caused such controversy was that people like Banyan Retreat got together with the Spiritualists National Union and other interested bodies, and they came together to create a protocol. So that protocol couldn't have been in place at the time I witnessed the David Thompson seance, but it's a pity because the protocol, to my mind, sounds reasonable. The Union and Banyan Retreat and others decided that they don't particularly want a blacked out seance to take place on their premises. But if such a seance is to take place, then certain procedures should be put in place. And they revolve mainly around video cameras and infrared. Now, the Union, I think, was suggesting that churches could buy, or they could purchase modern military equipment for night vision for Stansted Hall, for example, where in Stansted it would be used very regularly. And military grade night vision doesn't include infrared, or if it does, it's minimal. The spirit people say that the infrared cameras that could be used today emit much less infrared radiation than the spirit people allowed in the past. You know, the bottom line about all this is that the physical mediumship is genuine. For example, in the past, in the seances of Jack Webber, when Harry Edwards was involved, they invited a photographer who specialized in infrared, Leon Isaac, to take photographs, and numerous photographs were taken by infrared camera. No harm to the medium, physical seance. In the mediumship of Minnie Harrison with the Saturday Night Club seances, Tom Harrison took infrared photographs. They appear in his book, and the photographs are absolutely wonderful. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful to take such photographs in a David Thompson seance and have Louis Armstrong and your spirit relatives and the guides all appearing in lovely infrared? Well, anyway, a lot of people don't like blacked out seances for the potential for fraud, which has no doubt taken place countless times in the past. So there's nothing wrong with skepticism about all this. And indeed, skepticism is quite healthy and should be encouraged so that truth is ascertained and that facts are brought to light and proof is made extant. Let's take a look at what skeptics have said on Rational Wiki, a website pretty closely aligned to Wikipedia. This is what they say about a David Thompson seance. Thompson works as a physical medium. It is alleged that he exudes ectoplasm during his seances, so that spirits can materialize and speak to sitters. Thompson hosts seances with the Circle of the Silver Cord, spiritualist group in Sydney, Australia. He is gagged and tied to a chair with plastic cable ties during his seances, which are hosted in total darkness. It is well known that these are easy to escape from. Cable ties, that is. He claims to have frequently talked with a spirit guide called William Charles Cadwell, born in London in 1830. However, skeptics claim there is no evidence that such a man existed. Another report mentioned a child called Timmy, who played with a trumpet and luminous ball. But Thompson has been described as an outright fake by skeptics. Whilst not actually being caught with his trousers down, committing fraud directly in the act, like fellow medium Gary Mannion, he has been suspected of it. Suspiciously, Thompson has rejected infrared filming of his seances. He is opposed to cameras. There appears to be only one photograph taken of the ectoplasm, and that shows that it resembles cloth. Spiritualist Roy Stemman, who has been an editor of Psychic News, attended a seance with Thompson and noted, "The medium controlled everything. He knew who would be attending because we were required to provide our details in advance and bring with us photo ID to prove we were who we said we were." I don't recall having to provide details in advance or photographic evidence to say who I was, but that might be possible and something that I could have overlooked, or it didn't happen. Stemman suggested that a red light would also have confirmed that Thompson did not have a way of getting out of the restraints, impersonating the spirits who were supposed to be walking among us before pulling the cardigan over his head and then pulling it back on the wrong way around, and then slipping back into the straps. He and his supporters will argue that what I am suggesting is impossible, but a competent stage illusionist can easily accomplish such trickery, as Thompson should know, since Harry Houdini is said to be one of his regular seance visitors. Well, I know Roy Stemman from his work on Psychic News and as a spiritualist, and he comes across to me as a very open-minded and a vastly experienced person in the spiritualist movement. Thompson later replied to Stemman's criticisms, accusing him of bias against physical mediumship. I'm not sure about that, see, because if you had good quality physical mediumship in red light and infrared under camera conditions, somebody like Roy Stemman would be only too pleased to verify that that was indeed spirit materialization. And plenty of people in the past have taken good quality photographs. A friendly account from the editor of Psychic News noted that Thompson requires all guests to be searched with a metal detector, which would make it much harder to catch him out with smuggled lights, night vision equipment, or recording gear. And I mentioned that Sue Farrow has definitely done a report on a David Thompson seance. So the article from Rational Wiki mentioned Gary Mannion. Let's take a look at what happened in the Gary Mannion seance. In 2008, Mannion was offered £50,000 if he could prove his psychic surgery claims. He originally agreed to be tested by Professor Chris French, a psychologist specializing in the psychology of paranormal beliefs and experiences. And French was supposed to carry out the test. However, the test was cancelled because Mannion took issue with the protocols. That may or may not be justified. We're hearing one side of the story here. We had Warren Kaler undertake 2 physical seances in the room next door, and we began to wonder what was taking place because it was blacked out. It was very loud music. Strange events. I could describe them in detail, and I might do later. But the third visit of Warren Kaler did not take place because he took issue with the protocols we were then suggesting to be imposed. And those protocols only involved tying the medium, Warren Kaler, to the chair using cotton so that we would know whether he actually left the chair or not. And, that was, again, before the Gary Mannion incident. So what is the Gary Mannion incident? Well, skeptics suspected a long time that Mannion had been involved in psychic fakery. Indisputable evidence of fraud was obtained in 2016 during a seance at Banyan Retreat, Kent. Mannion was supposed to be firmly controlled in a cabinet during the seance. However, secret night vision camera footage revealed him to leaving his cabinet and moving around the dark seance room, faking spiritualist phenomena. The video footage is now public. In one video, he can be seen fully conscious, taking the shirt off and swinging it around to imitate spirit breezes. Mannion later responded to the evidence of fraud, claiming it wasn't really his fault as he was unconscious in trance. He did not apologize for his actions. Well, they weren't his actions if he was unconscious in trance. There we go. The whole incident may have thrown the spiritual movement into disarray, and I think that's a good thing. Those who have been to my seances before judge me on what you have experienced for yourself. Going forward, I will strive to gather as much evidence as I can and continue to work in more and more lighted conditions. A bigger statement will follow in the near future. If that's not enough for you, feel free to unfriend me and not comment to my posts. I presume that was Gary Mannion's response. Gary Mannion is now working in Britain in a number of venues. He was working out of the Parsonage Side Retreat with some of the circle that he brings with him from Australia, and lately he's working with Jeff Jones near Hengoed, South Wales, in their facility. I know Jeff quite well. I'd like to hear the protocols that have been put in place in Jeff's circles in respect of Gary Mannion. The incident caused a large uproar in the spiritualist community. Mannion has been denounced by fellow spiritualists and believers in psychic phenomenon. The spiritualist magazine Psychic News has denounced Gary Mannion. They have commented that his ability to fool many people poses serious questions about the involvement of spiritualist churches and venues. Some of them, SNU, Spiritualists National Union, members, and independent centres in unwittingly exposing their followers in fraudulent activities. Spiritualists themselves have been the first to find fraudulent activity taking place, and they've never been reluctant to bring it to the public's attention. And it was because of the fraudulent practices that spiritualism became a legal religion. One of only two legal religions in Britain. The other one, of course, being Christianity. I'm not sure whether it's a legal religion right now, mind, because it was only legal when there was a fraudulent Mediums Act. Not all purported physical mediums are genuine all the time. A lot of them are genuine, maybe early on when everything is flourishing really well, and then maybe it disappears and they have to try to resurrect something, possibly, benefit of the doubt. Things that can take place under the trance that they have no control of. That definitely happens. Are they guilty of any fraud if something is not liked when that takes place? I don't know. There have been total fraudulent practices taking place, and some of the best researchers, one pair were looking into a woman called Palladino, I think it was her name, and she came out of the traveling community of Eastern Europe, and these were Italian investigators, and maybe she was a Roma from Italy, I'm not sure. But anyway, they knew exactly what tricks she could perform. And when they'd watch them and they'd let them happen, when the other phenomena started taking place, they knew it wasn't her doing it because she was incapable of doing that. They knew the tricks that she could do. And they found that the true phenomena to be absolutely wonderful, and was the basis of their investigations. And so spiritualists like Arthur Conan Doyle, if you read his book The Land of Mist, he'll describe in there, it's a novel based on all his researches and knowledge and experience gained at inquiring into spiritualism and then becoming a spiritualist. Arthur Conan Doyle, Land of Mist, it's a great read. He did his best to find fake mediums whenever he could. Now, mental mediumship, it can be the easiest thing in the world to do, but it can also be the most difficult. And, you know, the quality varies so dramatically between people who potched it. I'm not pointing the finger anywhere. And, you know, I've got a certain standard as a mental medium. I astound myself with some of the facts and information that comes through me that I can't I didn't know about beforehand, you know, and it just happens, and it's coming through me, you know, when I'm working as a mental medium. To the very best mental mediums, and often the very best mental mediums, and I've been with Margaret now 20 to nearly 30 years, in about 28 years. And the phenomena I've witnessed and the mental mediumship evidence that has come through her is just mind-boggling. It's mind-blowing. It really is wonderful, and convinces in its own right. But with Margaret, there's so much other phenomena as well. I've seen the lights around her. She was sitting there one day, and these beautiful green light just exuded from everywhere. It was in the middle of the night, and I found myself talking with a Chinese gentleman then in Margaret's presence. Instead of Margaret, there was a Chinese man, but couldn't see him so much as know that he was Chinese. Mentally, I got the impression he was. And of course, I was talking with him, and it became obvious then. But the light, you know, anybody can fake a trance and can come out with a lot of information. Anybody could do that, I'm sure. But how could you create that light that came out of you? I've never seen any. I have seen other people do that. Another medium, I did see another medium do that. He was giving a lecture on spiritual healing in a high school in Cardiff when the union organised a day of talks and demonstrations, and he was standing there talking about healing. And I wasn't the only one, and not Margaret, but other friends of mine. We saw a green halo all around his head, big, beautiful green halo just manifested around the gentleman's head. I don't know his first name, but I know his son, who's Gareth Jones from Barry. He was his father, and he was a builder by trade, but he was a wonderful spiritual healer as well. So I've rabbited on an awful long time now. I did say I would talk about Professor Chris French. Now, in this edition of Psychic News, it's the April 2024 edition of Psychic News, there's an article, "I may be wrong," says skeptical professor. A professor of psychology who regards paranormal phenomena as having a purely psychological basis has admitted that he may be wrong in his disbelief. Professor Christopher French has also mellowed in his view of parapsychology, no longer viewing it as pseudoscience, but a worthwhile area of research, a genuine science. And Professor French has written a book, The Science of Weird Shit, Why Our Minds Conjure the Paranormal. Runs to 424 pages, published by MIT Press. He's about to do a lecture at the Royal Institution this April 22nd, 2024. Chris French is Professor Emeritus of Psychology at Goldsmiths College, University of London, and has long been an outspoken authority on anomalistic psychology. The term reflects his belief that apparently supernormal circumstances can be explained by looking at cultural and motivational factors such as a wish to believe. Well, when you see lights around people, is that a wish to believe? What are you just seeing lights around people? Professor French says, most important for me as a psychologist, we would be ignoring an important part of human experience if we make no attempt to understand the weird stuff. We can learn important lessons about the human mind by taking such experiences and beliefs seriously. He suggested that dramatic demonstrations of the imperfect nature of perception, memory, and judgment can provide extremely effective teaching tools. The professor believes that many people are drawn to the paranormal and related topics because they appear to offer an exciting alternative to the humdrum of everyday life, as well as providing seemingly satisfactory answers to many of the big existential questions that face us all. What is the nature of consciousness? Good question. Any evidence supporting the existence of life after death would logically imply that mind can become separated from the brain. One day, many neuroscientists assume they will be able to explain consciousness fully in terms of processes at the neural level, without any need to postulate an immaterial soul.